Good evening. Tonight, this arena here in Corpus Christi, Texas, was to have been filled to capacity with enthusiastic WWE fans. Tonight's storyline was to have been the alleged demise of my character, Mr. McMahon. However, in reality, WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead. Their bodies were discovered this afternoon in their new suburban Atlanta home. The authorities are undergoing an investigation. We here in the WWE can only offer our condolences to the extended family of Chris Benoit. And the only other thing we can do at this moment is tonight pay tribute to Chris Benoit. We will offer you some of the most memorable moments in Chris's professional life, and you will hear tonight comments from his peers, those here, his fellow performers, those here who loved Chris and admired him so much. So tonight will be a 3-hour tribute to one of the greatest WWE superstars of all time. Tonight will be a tribute to Chris Benoit. Last night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight.
If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
WBCB presents Pro Wrestling Weekly.
Tell me he didn't just say that.
Call in with a question or comment at 215-949-3232 or 888-922-2149.
The Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour, funky like a monkey, oh yeah.
And now, here's your host of Pro Wrestling Weekly, Fearon Derry.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Really? Yeah!
Hello and welcome to Pro Wrestling Weekly here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com. Fearon Derry here with you. Taking a look back 5 years ago this past week where, well, the wrestling world suffered a huge blow, to say the least. A notorious weekend in the annals of wrestling history. Of course, what initially thought was triple murder, but turning out to be the double murder-suicide involving Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their 7-year-old son Daniel. We're going to be taking a look back at your memories of that weekend and the lasting effect that it's had over the course of the last 5 years, how it's affected WWE today. And we want to get your thoughts. Do you think that WWE will eventually be able to turn the page and mention Chris Benoit again and put his footage back into the archives, or will he continue to be blacklisted for eternity? So we'll get more of your thoughts on that as well. We'll also take a look back this week at something that John Cena said on Raw that kind of made me raise an eyebrow and almost shake my head a little bit. And no, it had nothing to do with the Star Wars references that he used. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've got news and notes, updates on the TNA Bound for Glory series that's going on, and, of course, developments as we get closer to Destination X, as well as the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. We have found out that there will be 2 Money in the Bank matches at the pay-per-view. A couple of interesting directions in which they're going, and we'll get more into that. But after last week having an issue with the phones, I'm guessing it was a bit of a rib on my part, or somebody putting a rib on me, but I'd like to think we've got it back up and running, so let's go ahead and kickstart things with Dan? Yes, yeah. Dan from Chicago. Dan, welcome to Pro Wrestling Weekly.
What's up, Ron? How you doing this week?
The phones are up. I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah, like I said to you, off air that, I was in the Shawn Michaels line, so it was all right. I was in my glory waiting 4 hours. We waited 4 hours to meet the guy.
Well, yeah, he definitely garners demand wherever he goes, even though he hasn't competed in a couple of years now, but obviously last being in a WWE ring at WrestleMania this past year as a guest referee, and of course his new outdoor show doing rather well. So a mix of fans, huh?
I'm kind of glad that it wasn't a WWE related event because he was such a nice guy. He was like the nicest guy, because I've been to a couple of them where they just sign it and you go. You know what I mean? When it's WWE related, he seemed happy. It was awesome. It was an awesome moment. The funny thing is, I'll tell you a story. a White Sox guy. Bill Milton was also doing autograph session there, too. There was a combined thing with Shawn Michaels and Bill Milton. So apparently they told Bill Milton to get up and walk the line and see who was here for him.
Oh, man. So they had the two guys there, but 95% of them at least were there to see Michaels, and the White Sox player not so much.
Yeah, it was a good moment for me because I'm a huge Cub fan, so that made me smile.
Ooh, well,
yeah.
I was going to say, has it been that long removed since the White Sox World Series?
2005.
2005, yeah. 7 years. Well, yeah, I was going to say, it's getting up there for the Phils, too, but that's a whole other story. Was it? Oh, that's right. You had that Facebook feedback last night of Cliff Lee, I think it was. So
you know what? I'll tell you about this after my Benoit stuff. Let's talk wrestling. Let's talk Chris Benoit.
Absolutely.
All right. I missed the dude. I know what he did was obviously beyond wrong. WWE needs to go to the spots where he was good and not worry about just one weekend.
So basically, focus on the highlights of his career and not necessarily the lowlights of how his life ended.
Obviously, this wasn't the same guy that weekend. Obviously, well, not that we know what he's like anyway, but from what the reports were saying, like some of the kids were saying that, I guess I remember that one person was saying that he would drive them to the airport. He said he was the nicest guy. When he's hired, that he can't, ever see him doing anything like this. Obviously, something happened that none of us will ever know.
And there have been a lot of speculation as to what exactly was done, and probably the most credible of them. I mean, when this all came out, of course, the biggest thing, the media immediately jumped on steroids and roid rage and things of that nature, and it didn't exactly help. Looking at a statistic, good old WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt. Stating that Benoit was prescribed testosterone as part of a treatment for testosterone replacement therapy because he had used steroids in the past, plus steroids were found in the home when the police were doing the investigation. But probably the most credible explanation actually came from Chris Nowinski, the former Harvard and Tough Enough wrestler who, because of concussions, retired himself and is now doing some brain research studies. And they said he may have been suffering from repeated untreated concussions throughout his career, leading to that unstable mental state. Nowitzki was quoted as saying that Benoit was one of the only guys who would take a chair shot to the back of the head, which is stupid. That's a direct quote from Nowinski. Tests were conducted on his brain at West Virginia University and showed that Benoit's brain was so severely damaged that it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient at the age of 40.
I believe that Nowitzki's also doing that to the NFL people, too, some of the NFL.
Yeah, you see that with a lot of the NFL guys. Kind of a local tie here, Andre Waters. That was, he was, big player. I mean, I was going to say, I'm a little young to have followed him, but, I mean, he was big in the early 90s, if I remember right, but Bill helped me out here. And, he in almost a similar fashion, ended his own life at a very young age, and a lot of people think it had to do with chronic traumatic easy for me to say, encephalopathy, CTE. That's become like the big buzzword when it comes to concussions and brain trauma and things of that nature. And in the scan of Benoit's brain tissue, he did suffer from that and had brain damage in all four lobes of the brain as well as the brain stem. So, I don't know, that's... I know a lot of people like to argue science, and I definitely don't want to make this that kind of an argument, but... It's a heck of a scan. They said repeated concussions can lead to dementia, which can contribute to severe behavioral problems. I mean, you saw that's what, I guess got Vern Gagne. That he was in trouble a few years ago. I mean, granted, he was in his 80s, but dementia, huh? Muhammad Ali, yeah. Well, he hasn't necessarily killed anyone, but I mean, Vern Gagne, when he was in a retirement home a couple of years ago, I guess body slammed another patient, not realizing where he was, and ended up, killing that patient. And I guess because of his dementia, he was, he didn't get into a whole lot of trouble for that. But it was a similar case in this regard. It was a matter of, a lot of people are speculating that it was a matter of him not realizing what he did at the time, realizing it after the fact, and then taking his own life. And a lot of that had to do with, the Bibles being placed next to Nancy, as well as yeah. I mean, you can only imagine what was going through his mind, but that was huge when that was found out that Monday afternoon that the 3 bodies had been discovered. It was a major crime scene. They hadn't found a suicide note, but there were Bibles next to Nancy and Daniel, and there was another Bible mixed in with Chris's personal belongings that had a handwritten notation saying, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." Whether that was written by Chris, that's, again, more speculation that's being thrown out there.
And what was up with that thing, too, that they were saying that there was some note or whatever, emails that through WWE Stamford, Connecticut that same day or something that...
Well, there was... I think what you might be talking about, there was actually a Wikipedia controversy because before everything went on, there was someone... It turned out to be ruled that it was unrelated, but somebody had posted on Wikipedia prior to the bodies being discovered that Chris had missed an event because of the death of his wife, Nancy. And, yeah, and the fact that it was posted before everything was found out, that led to, some sort of investigation on the person from Connecticut being involved in some way. And it turned out that it was purely coincidence.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Well, like I said, that's at least what, looking through, I've got like 17 pages of notes here, so I'm trying to, statement regarding Nancy Benoit's death was added to the Chris Benoit Wikipedia article 14 hours before police discovered the bodies of Benoit and his family. And it was initially reported on Wiki News and later Fox News Channel, and the article originally read, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. The stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy, was added at 12:01 a.m. Eastern on June 25th, and the Fayette County Police down in suburban Atlanta discovered the bodies at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 14 and a half hours later.
That's weird.
Yeah. So, after news of the early death notice reached mainstream media, the anonymous poster accessed Wiki News to explain his edit as, quote, huge coincidence and nothing more. Right. But police detectives still seized his computer equipment from who was the person responsible for the postings and called the posting an unbelievable hindrance to their investigation, but believed he was otherwise uninvolved, declining to press charges. So, yeah, I mean, there was just so much, there's so much to this.
And listening to Vince's voice on that ECW show, how he seemed like almost like not embarrassed, well, kind of embarrassed. Like,
I mean, Vince really took it on the chin because 24 hours earlier they talked about how great this guy was, and then they find out, as he said, 26 hours later, we just paid tribute to a murderer.
Oh.
So, Vince had a lot of egg on his face that day, so of course he sounded embarrassed.
Yeah, he sounded like, it was ridiculous. Like, to call out Chris Benoit, well, he is, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, still, to this day.
And that's kind of where WWE's in a tough position because, I mean, he was built up so strongly and, I mean, had such a following for a good portion of his 20-year career. But to have it end the way that it did, how do you separate the two? How do you separate the greatness of the wrestler and the tragedy of the final moments of his life?
They really don't talk about the past anyway, and that's probably due because of Chris. You don't hear, like, the United States title. You sometimes don't hear about people from the past who held the title. And that's probably due because of Chris Benoit, because he was a United States champion. You don't hear...
Probably the biggest example of a personalization of kind of showing favoritism toward one person and ignoring Benoit and the other. Every time the Royal Rumble comes around, they make mention that only 2 people have won the Rumble starting in the number 1 position. And they always go to footage of Shawn Michaels, hanging on to the rope from 95. But they never make mention of Benoit from 2004 at the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia here at the Wachovia Center.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah, this... I knew it was going to bring a lot of conversation to this, but we have to also look at the effect that it's had on the WWE. do you think that was the beginning of the kind of turn to a more family-friendly product?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to use the terminology PG, but that seems to be,
well, Cena said in this thing, Fudging, what the heck? You know what I mean? And he's like, oh. And then Jericho's like, Fudging, really? And Cena's like, well, we cater to 9-year-olds. Okay, so you don't care about me? They don't care about you?
Yeah, I was going to get into that next segment, but yeah, that's that was what Cena had said that kind of had me had me scratching my head a little bit, saying that something along the lines of the average age of is a 9-year-old, and I'll have that clip coming up on the other side of our first break, and I don't know, it seemed out of place. Well, one, it seemed out of place to mention, we're a PG product. Like, what's the point of that? And then to basically say that the majority of your audience are 9-year-olds. What does that say to the adults who have been following this for a while? And those same adults who, for the most part, are booing. Was that meant to be a jab at those who boo Cena?
Maybe, yeah.
Or are we just reading too much into it? I don't know. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Thanks so much for the call, Dan. We got to get rolling. I'm already up against a break, so we'll take care of that timeout. We'll get to Ron and Ed on the other side. We've got some Facebook feedback. Mike already chimed in. John chiming in as well. A ton to talk about. We'll get a little bit more into the Benoit stuff. As you can hear, there's already a ton of stuff out there and a lot more to certainly go through, get your thoughts on that, as well as a whole bunch more. Here are the numbers: 215-949-3232, as well as toll-free at 888-922-2149. Those are the ways to reach us via the phones. If you're a little shy, don't want to talk on air, but still want to get your opinion across, that's where we have our Facebook fan page, WBCB Pro Wrestling Weekly. Go ahead and give us a search, like us, and feel free to post on the wall, and we'll get your Facebook feedback on the air as well. And in case you missed the show, we've got archives going all the way back to October of last year on YouTube. Just take a search again of WBCB Pro Wrestling Weekly, and you can get those archives. I'll have this show's archive up sometime during the overnight tonight. I'd say about 12 to 15 hours from now. This is Pro Wrestling Weekly here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com.